Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome back, and thank you again for tuning in to the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley, talking to you on today's episode, a Sunday release, and we have a lot more off-season chatter that we need to talk about. Now, there's going to be some news and noise. There's some updates around the MLB that we really need to get diving into because we've had our last managerial position filled along with some other front office work being done. And we also got to talk about, a few names that are going to be popular. Now, we have three that I'd love to cover, and it's going to be a very interesting offseason. I don't want to just say free agency because we got three players that I want to talk about in this podcast in particular. Two that are going to be big-time free agents that are going to have a lot of attention around them. One that's going to be one of the top trade targets in the MLB. And just to be honest, there's going to be so much uncertainty around a lot of this. And Buster Olney had even said that a lot of MLB insiders are predicting a long, cold winter for free agents in the sense of this is going to be slow. People are not going to see the money that they thought they might be seeing. This pandemic could play into some dollars off of revenue lost, so teams might not be spending as much. So there's going to be a great deal of information coming, but I think it's just going to be an offseason like we didn't really expect. And so we have to keep our eyes on things, see where it's going to go, but try to make some predictions and look at what we think could happen all the same. But we're going to start things off with a little news and noise, and we got to talk about some big news that was very interesting, not just in the baseball world, but to me as well, as the Boston Red Sox have decided to bring back Alex Cora as their manager. They have rehired him, the team announced on Friday. Cora had led the Red Sox to the 2018 World Series title, but then they agreed to part ways when the whole Houston Astros sign-stealing scandal had started. He was suspended for one season by Major League Baseball for his role in the scandal. And once he left, things did not go well for Boston. They had ended the season last year 24-36, decided to let go what was interim manager at the time, Ron Renneke, who had replaced Cora in January. And I ultimately think it's the right move for the team. This is me speaking as a fan. This is me speaking as someone who's covering the game a little bit. I just think it's the right move for them, knowing how much he had helped the team and how great of a manager he had been for them. Now, obviously, there's scandal there. There's a lot that's going on. And the Red Sox were not allowed to speak to Cora until the World Series had ended. We believe. I mean, how do you truly really know and cover that? And it's a 2-year contract, so a 2-year team option for 2023 and 2024 as well. Cora had said he's grateful for the opportunity to manage again and return to the game. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be upset about this. And I sit here and I think it's justified. I understand why you possibly could be angry because of his involvement with the Astros. I mean, there was some reports of things that were happening with the Red Sox that didn't necessarily go 100% in any directions. There was some talk about stuff going on with Apple Watches and all that, but wasn't any major punishments that came down. And while I do have my issues with the sign stealing using TV monitors and everything, and the buzzers and all that, I ultimately still have to give him the benefit of the doubt. Because he and AJ Hinch are back managing, but they're back and they did something more than any of the players ever did. and that's actually served some type of punishment. I sit here and I can understand every angry thing you have about them in the game of baseball. But when it comes down to the honest truth, these guys were involved, the players were involved, front office was involved, but not everybody served a suspension. No players were touched. And I feel better moving forward about Cora getting a job back than I do for some players. Okay? The Astros were the team that were punished because they were the ones that allowed it. I get it. But when nothing comes down on any of the players and then the players' season goes on, then they talk about how the world's against you. Yeah, it was against you because of what you did. So I don't have any ill will towards Cora. I really don't. I don't agree with what he did. I don't give any forgiveness for what he did. What his punishment was justified. Maybe should have gone harsher. Who knows? I'm not in charge of that. But I just give him more benefit of the doubt because something actually happened to him. While there's others that were involved in this and nothing came down. So I'm going to kind of just leave it at that because that's something that still kind of bothers me with the whole situation. So Cora returning to the Red Sox, big move. Looking at those New York Mets, a lot going on there again. General manager Brodie Van Wagenen, he and much of the rest of the front office, we shouldn't just leave him. They are going to be leaving the New York Mets. The team had announced this on Friday as well. The moves were announced less than an hour after Steve Cohen completed his $2.4 billion purchase of the team. Special assistant to the general manager, Omar Minaya, assistant general managers, Alan Byard, Adam Guttridge, and executive director of player development, Jared Banner, also are leaving. The status currently of senior vice president and senior strategy officer, John Rico, was not mentioned, so we'll see what happens there. Steve Cohen coming in after the Wilpon family had this franchise for a long time, and he is making it pretty clear that he wants to put his stamp on this franchise. He wants to bring in his guys, try to start things fresh. And while it's upsetting and you hope the best for a lot of these former Mets employees, hey, when ownership changes, it's up to them what they want to do. So if the Mets were a team that were doing really well and dominating the game, it's a different story. But that they've kind of been up and down consistently in the middle of the pack, it feels like. So if Cohen wants to make these moves, power to him. So the search is definitely going to be starting. We are going to be trying to find where this is going to go. And there's going to be a lot of options out there. And it's going to be a long offseason to begin with. So we'll see what is in the future. We are going to have so many stories on the Mets this summer or this winter going into the summer. You got that feeling, you can tell. It's going to be a lot going on. We're going to be hearing about that other team in New York for a lot of this offseason. So be braced, be ready for that. Moving back to some players here, Rob Manfred will not punish Justin Turner for leaving isolation after testing positive for COVID-19 in the World Series celebration. Now, this is the Dodgers' third baseman, Justin Turner, who is to be a free agent. That's important to note here. There's no discipline coming down. And I find this very curious for a league that was trying to be very stern with players about being careful, being cautious. I look at the whole situation that happened with the Indians, how the Indians players were just irate with Clevenger and Plesac earlier in the year. And this, it opens a door that I don't really want to go into, but Justin Turner did issue an apology. But I don't know. Accepting responsibility, apologizing, all this stuff, it's very concerning for me because it just showed careless behavior that's going to be allowed and it's going to slip through the cracks. And there have been reports that multiple other Dodgers have now tested positive for this. Now, I will be realistic at the same time and say we don't know if they got this passed on to them before we knew about Justin Turner. We don't know if these people maybe passed it on to we don't know if they got it away from who knows? That's up in the air. But it really is not a good look with him being allowed to return to the field to do this. And then more positive tests come and no type of punishment of any sorts is dealt out. This is once again, this takes me back to the whole Houston Astros thing. Now, obviously, that's on a much higher scale. But when the punishment is not coming down on players for doing things, it's just very interesting to me. And it's a slippery slope, honestly, in my mind. It's something that teams need to be very, very careful about. And if we're going to allow players to get away with a lot more than front offices, then I'm hoping these teams are going to start thinking about punishments. But like I said, where this gets interesting is Justin Turner being a free agent. We don't know if he's going to be back with the Dodgers next year. So what type of punishment really could they do? Who knows? So that's a disappointing story. I don't like talking about it, but I mean, it has to. It has to be brought up. So there it is for that. Let's move on to some awards we have here. 2020 Silver Slugger winners were announced. For the American League, Salvador Perez was our catcher for the Royals, getting the Silver Slugger. First baseman, Jose Abreu for the White Sox. Second base, DJ LeMahieu for the Yankees. Shortstop, Tim Anderson for the White Sox. Jose Ramirez, third base for the Indians. And our three outfielders, Mike Trout of the Angels, Eloy Jimenez for the White Sox, and Teoscar Hernandez for the Blue Jays. And, of course, our DH, Nelson Cruz for the Twins. Great showing for the Bats for the Chicago White Sox as three guys on there. Mike Trout getting his 8th Silver Slugger award in the American League after batting .281 with 17 home runs and 46 RBIs. That's big. There also was some domination of the Silver Slugger awards over in the National League as we had 4 Braves players. Travis d'Arnaud at catcher, Freddie Freeman, first base. We had Ronald Acuna in the outfield and Marcell Ozuna at DH. Those 4 Braves players getting honored. And then filling the rest of the gaps, we had second baseman Donovan Solano for the Giants, Manny Machado at third base for the Padres, Fernando Tatis for the Padres as well at short, Juan Soto for the Nationals in the outfield, and Mookie Betts for the Dodgers in the outfield as well. Just an impressive list. I mean, and these selections are based off a combination of all of your offensive stats, batting average, on-base percentage, slugging percentage. It comes to, managers and coaches, how they view these players overall as well. So very deserving. We are just riddled with players from great offensive teams. So you have to say congratulations to those guys. Well-deserved, well-earned. Impressive. I love the addition of Donovan Solano. What he did for the Giants this year, he's a journeyman in the MLB. And I'm glad that he got his appreciation, acknowledgement. It's just that one name that's snuck in there just kind of really sticks out. Great season, 326 batting average. He's not a power guy. He's more top of the order, but just impressive because, like I said, he's been traveling all over the place in the MLB. Been with the Marlins for a few years, won stints with the Yankees, 2 years with the Giants. By far, his best season. Consistent player, too. I mean, he didn't get to be a consistent play for the Giants last year, even though things were starting to look a little positive for him. So we'll see if the 32-year-old can continue, and congratulations to everybody else on that list. A lot of fun. So we need to start talking about some of these guys in the offseason, where they're going to go, what teams could be interested, what we could be seeing happen, who should be going after them. There's so many situations here. We're going to get to talk about 3 names and a lot of teams that could be interested. We're going to start things off with a little Francisco Lindor when we come back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Mr. Francisco Lindor. It's fun. We're going to talk about that news and noise. We just got done talking about news and noise. Moving on to Mr. Lindor, who is going to most likely be the hot name of the offseason now moving forward. Now, he's not a free agent, obviously, but it seems very, very likely that he is going to be traded in this offseason. He has one big year left on his contract. Then he gets to be a free agent, heading into that absolutely loaded shortstop free agent class next year. That'll be a fun conversation for another day. But I imagine wherever he ends up, it's going to be a team that's going to be wanting to settle up and get a long-term contract done. Now, Lindor is coming off a season that's definitely not one of his best. But at 26 years old, his resume for his career is pretty phenomenal, and so you got to think a team's going to be taking a chance on him. So through 60 games this year, batted .258, 8 home runs, 27 RBIs, on-base percentage of .335. That's actually pretty close to what he's used to doing. Slugging .415, that's down. OPS is down as well, and his WAR is down total. But the rest of his career, I mean, for average, he's around .285, 346 on-base percentage, .488 slugging, .833 OPS, and he had been getting to the point where he's a consistent 30-plus home run guy while still batting towards the top of your lineup. So he's going to be a face of some team moving forward, and it's looking like it's not going to be the Cleveland Indians, as we've been getting reports and a lot of feelers that it's going to be done this offseason. And I have my concerns on how this can truly be done. Now, we talked a little bit previously, we just touched upon it, how in the pandemic, money's going to change here. What some of these players are going to get is going to be very different. And Lindor would be a part of a massive, massive, massive free agent shortstop offseason if he goes into free agency next year. So you wonder if he's going to try to get traded and set the market and get his money quicker, or if he's going to wait to see if that money has the chance to go up. It's a risk-reward type of thing. If you sign first, get your guaranteed dollars in the offseason next year, it's not looking like the money's going to be the same. He wins out, but maybe it could get better. There's a lot to talk about. That's going to be between him and his agent and trying to figure out and play that game. But it's come to the realization that he has to be traded. The Indians won't shell out the money. There are some team needs, especially offensively, that they would rather load up with some top prospects probably than have that one big player where they're spending a lot of money, especially when their strength has really been their pitching. They would like to try to probably balance out and get more players across the board. And when it comes down to it, there's going to be many, many, many teams to consider. And I'm looking mainly at the teams that are big market, big money. Now, I have one in here that's not necessarily a big market team, but we do have to consider them because the rumors have been swirling about it in the past. So I'm going to start there and talk about the Cincinnati Reds. There had been rumors that they would be a team interested, a team willing to put a package together to get Lindor. But I wonder, with so much money guaranteed all over the place right now for them, will they have the ability to you know, shell out even more on a 10-year deal. It's going to be difficult for them. Now, there was a former general manager, Jim Bowden, who proposed a potential trade in a piece for The Athletic. Nick Senzel, infielder Jonathan India, the pitcher Tyler Mayhew, and another player to try to make it a big deal. And it didn't happen then, but he's a former top pick. He has shown that he is a pretty good player. It'd be a good return. Molly had an okay 2020 season, 3.59 ERA, 11.3 strikeouts per 9 innings. So things might be tough to move him now, especially if you can't get Trevor Bauer back to Cincinnati. And he's a very, very high upside pitcher. And then another high upside player, and Jonathan India, is something that's going to intrigue the Indians. They're trying to get the most back. They don't care what team is really going to be offering. But can the Reds offer the 10-year deal to keep him afterwards? It seems like Cincinnati is all in right now. All in, trying to win with all the contracts they've had in the past. I imagine they're going to offer a big 1-year deal for Trevor Bauer. Maybe they just take the 1-year rental and think that they are close enough to win. It's going to push Cincinnati to be a better team, that's for sure. But the National League Central is tough, and the National League Central, or the National League overall, is going to be tough. So I could see the trade happening, but the extension is something that I would be not believing that it could get done. So I just wanted to push that one to get it out of the way and start talking some more about some of these bigger market teams that I think are possible. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if this happened, but I don't think it's going to happen as well, is the Boston Red Sox potentially getting in on this. The Red Sox just watched as they traded Mookie Betts away, your 5-tool star, go over to the Dodgers and win a World Series, while your team kind of spiraled out of control this past season. Now, Mookie Betts isn't on the mound, so that's one of your main problems. And I think the Red Sox necessarily really need to shore up that pitching before they really look at a lot of other spots. But I do wonder if they are a little upset how they just lost their star, who just signed a big deal with the Dodgers to be there long term. And I would be curious if they would try to get back in on the market and get a big name guy. Would they move Jeter Downs? Because I would think that they really believe in Xander Bogaerts, and I don't know if Bogaerts is as enticing to the Indians. Maybe he would be. He's still a really great player, and he's under contract for a little bit. Maybe moving someone to third base. There's a lot that could happen here. I look at it mainly on the fact, are the Red Sox desperate to get a star back again? That's my only move in this. But they got to address pitching first. But I wanted to talk about it, at least throw it out there. But now we have a lot of other teams that I could definitely be discussing that would make a lot of sense to me. The first one I want to say is the Dodgers. And you're going to go, the Dodgers, really? They just traded for Mookie Betts. They just signed him to a big deal. Yes, they did. But they have some interesting things they could do here. Now, Corey Seeger, World Series MVP. He plays shortstop. You're going to bring in Lindor? Yeah, I think I could, because when it comes down to it, Seager's a free agent next year as well. So then you have Lindor and Seeger. Potentially you can try to sign one of them. Justin Turner, your third baseman, could potentially be leaving in free agency. Seeger could slide over to third base while Lindor's at short. Kiki Hernandez is going to be gone in free agency. That's a gap at second base you also have. We just saw Betts sign a big extension, so we know that the Dodgers aren't necessarily scared to do that. And before the Mookie Betts trade happened, we also know that the Dodgers were interested in Francisco Lindor. Now, it would cost the Dodgers something, but they also have trade chips. Gavin Lux is a big-time infielder prospect that might interest the Indians. It would be very intriguing for a team to try to put together two massive contracts like Betts and Lindor together. But if you know you have that tandem for the next 10 years, but probably 6, 7 great years, I could definitely see them being interested in that. And it's going to take a team that's willing to spend to get him and get an extension done. Because the 1-year rental is going to be tough with this. It's going to be tough. So they're just a team that I could see. They're going to have to fill some gaps. They're going to have the prospects to trade. Why not go all in? Why not go all in? The next team I'm looking at is the New York Yankees. The Yankees are in a similar position in the sense that they might lose some free agents here. Now, the Yankees just lost the AL East, lost the American League, and they were probably the favorites and one of the more dangerous teams in baseball. And adding a better bat to an already loaded offensive lineup is never a bad idea. And are the Yankees really believing that Gleyber Torres is the answer at shortstop? Is he? Also, we need a left-handed bat to go along with our very loaded right-handed lineup. Something interesting as well as Lindor being that switch hitter. So let's see if a deal of Quint Frazier and some other young players are a package that could get this done. And Torres is 24, was an all-star. Picked up some MVP votes in 2019, but we just have to say he's not been convincingly enough for the Yankees. And so if they look to move on and upgrade, they're also going to be a team that's willing to spend and potentially give a contract. It's possible. It could happen. Don't be shocked. And did we forget to mention DJ LeMahieu at second base? Might not be back as well if he signs elsewhere. So there's that gap again. You trade for Lindor, you can move Torres over, and then you have a spot for him. So it's something to for sure consider. Now, I also want to make sure that we take the time to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. They spend a lot of money. Bryce Harper just got his mega deal. Twice they've missed the playoffs. The Phillies need to improve their bullpen. That's a problem as well. Their starting rotation could get a little better. They want to sign Real Muto back. But Didi Gregorius is also a free agent. And if they can't get a deal done there, Philly is a team that would be willing to spend and willing to move somebody to try to get Lindor to help out at that shortstop position. That's a hole right now. We don't know who's going to be there. And as a team that is desperate to get to the postseason, why not go all in? I look at this more as a desperation move as well instead of a contract extension. But Philly would be able to find the money. They'd be able to make it work, especially if they make the playoffs. You're telling me that if Lindor got traded there, then they make the postseason, that they wouldn't be all in? You're crazy. But that's also going to depend on what they have to shell out for Real Muto, because then you're playing him and Harper and Lindor. Ooh, that gets a little bit tougher. So we'll see what happens in that situation. And the last team I want to talk about, hey, let's go back to New York. Let's talk about the Mets. I'm going to continue to push this one. They could have a crazy offseason. Steve Cohen has already been making moves, changing a lot of things. What would be another great headline grabbing move? How about Francisco Lindor coming to New York? But no, not for the Yankees, but to the Mets. Now, the Mets have 22-year-old shortstop Andreas Jimenez, hit .263 in 49 games, his rookie last year. Plus speed, defensively capable. He would be of interest. They have a right-handed prospect in Matthew Allen. You know, the pitching is not awful for the Mets with starters, hoping that Syndergaard comes back, and they could get in on other pitching free agents as well. it could be a big battle between these two New York teams to get Lindor. And man, would that be exciting. I just am not counting out a guy who just put up $2.4 billion. He can always make a move. I'm always going to have my eye on that. Curious to see if it happens. And while there's a lot of other fun teams that would be interesting to discuss when it comes to making a trade, like the Blue Jays team would be fun to think about pairing him with all the young players they already have. The Angels could be an exciting one. They got to make an answer at shortstop. Can they boost their offense as well? I don't know necessarily if everyone's going to be willing to pony up and offer an extension. Is the 1-year rental going to be enough? Do the Angels really think that's going to push them to contention if they can't sign them? Are the Blue Jays willing to give up young prospects when they're kind of building towards something good? It could go a lot of different directions. So, while there's a lot of teams I could talk about, I'm just going to keep it a little simple. I just think big market teams are going to be the ones to look at. He's going to end up somewhere else. He's not going to be in Cleveland this year. I don't think that's possible. It seems pretty evident that he's going to be moving on. Look to these big market teams. All right, so that's our first guy we're going to talk about. Now we have a couple of free agents we have to dive into. Staying with that New York topic, where's DJ LeMahieu going to end up next year? Something I want to discuss coming up next on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Keeping a slight trend of all of these star infielders that could for sure be on the move. Moving on from Francisco Lindor to Mr. DJ LeMahieu, who has been one of the hottest bats in baseball as of recent. He's done a great job. There were questions with LeMahieu coming from Colorado, where a lot of people are like, okay, is his hitting really that great, or is he benefiting from the fact that he is playing out here, Mile High City? Goes to New York on a 2-year deal. He proves, oh yeah, this might be the real thing. Last 2 seasons with the New York Yankees, 327 batting average, 375 on base, 518 slugging in 2019, 26 home runs, 102 RBIs. And then 2020, 10 home runs, 27 RBIs, 364 batting average, was our batting champion. 421 on base percentage, 590 slugging, 1.011 OPS. He has set himself up for a very nice potential payday as one of the top free agents this offseason. Now, he has been very impressive. And I can't take anything away from him. He's one of those pure bats that still is using the field and hitting the ball all over the place. And I think he's going to get a very nice contract for his efforts. But I don't know what necessarily the length of his contract is going to be. This last contract he signed with the Yankees was 2 years, $24 million, which ends up looking like an absolute steal. Absolute steal, especially when he came from Colorado. he had one little down year in 2018. He batted 276, but before that, 310, 348, 301. He was showing that he could hit the ball. He comes in, he plays well off of that, but we got to think about the fact that he is going to be 32 to start the 2021 season. And that's going to matter. That is going to matter. And the Yankees are a team that are going to have to make a big decision on whether they want to slide a blank check over his way or if they're going to say, go see what you get and come back and talk to us. I think ultimately this is going to be something the Yankees decide upon because if they really want him, they'll keep him. But I still want to talk about all of these teams. The teams that I think that are going to offer the big deal, like I said, the Yankees, I think they're going to try to match just about anything that they get. They really need to because we talked about Gleyber Torres. They may not believe in him fully. You have a shortstop that maybe you don't believe in. You lose your second baseman, who is your batting average stud at the top of your lineup. Your offense is really loaded. We know that. But you don't want to take major hits to it in the offseason. You want to upgrade in spots. You want to stay the same in spots that you know you've been successful. I don't know if they're going to let him walk. I don't know. But the other team that I think could offer a big deal is that other one across, again, the city, in the New York Mets. Again, I'm going to keep beating this drum. I think they're going to have a big offseason. Even if they don't sign anyone, they're going to be in on a lot of people. And they would love to take somebody away from the Yankees. Now, the Mets thing gets a little interesting because the Mets do have Robinson Cano at second base. And I think it's going to come to be a big piece on whether or not the DH actually happens. It's looking like right now, no. But that's not 100% guaranteed at this point. So if the DH does come into effect, the Mets, I think, are fully willing to move Cano to DH, offer some money for LeMahieu, let him slide in at second base. Boom. There's a good move. That's a good move. And Robinson Cano, who is under contract for 3 more years, is really the big wild card. They need a DH there for that to make sense. So that's what I have. I wouldn't be surprised if the Dodgers get in on this a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised a few other teams. And the Dodgers I want to stick with a little bit because when I say a team that maybe should offer the big deal, it could be the Dodgers. We talked about Kiki Hernandez, free agent. Justin Turner, free agent. Corey Seager is going to be a free agent after next year. So you have 3 infield spots that in another season, you don't necessarily have anybody under contract at this point. So maybe you believe in Gavin Lux being your starting second baseman. But LeMahieu could probably provide a little bit of help in playing third base as well. So there's moves to be made here. I wouldn't be surprised. The Dodgers are not paying massive contracts to a ton of people right now. They still got a lot of young guys that haven't hit those major paydays. Betts and Kershaw are really their big deals at this point. So, do they offer a contract to LeMahieu to try to keep themselves competitive and strong? And it doesn't slow things up with Lux. You could still let him come up. I don't think it's a problem in any way, shape, or form. So I think they should consider offering the big deal. Another team that I think should consider it is the St. Louis Cardinals. They were not good offensively last year. That needs to be pointed out. They finished second to last in the National League in runs scored. Fixing that offense should be a top priority for the Cardinals when they got some good pitching, some young guys that are great pitching. Wainwright just had one of his best seasons in a while. And they got some other young guys going to be coming back. Colton Wong has a $12.5 million team option. Matt Carpenter has struggled for the last couple seasons, and that's leaving open spots for LeMahieu to potentially fill in 2021. I think this one makes a lot of sense. The Cardinals, all they do is make smart moves, it feels like. They don't overpay anybody. They don't go after free agents that aren't going to work out. It's a well-run organization, and this just seems like a fit that would make a lot of sense. I think it's possible they could offer the big deal. So Cardinals, Dodgers, they should be the ones in on this. I think looking at their roster and what things could be in the next couple seasons makes the most sense. But ultimately, the best fit, the best fit, I think you have to stay with the Yankees. I really do. He has become really popular in the Yankees organization and with their fans. Versatile, hard worker approach to the game. Every time he needs to get a hit, he does it for the Yankees. He's a fan favorite there right now. They will do what's necessary to keep him. And I just think he's ultimately going to get the blank check slid over to him. But a little wild card, just a sleeper team. Don't count out the Rockies. I mean, he played 7 seasons there. There's comfort there. He hit well there. And they've struggled since he left. I don't know if he's going to be enough to put him in the postseason, but they need to get some more players. The top of their lineup was really solid at the beginning of the year with Arenado, Trevor Story, Charlie Blackmon. But it falls off after that. And LeMahieu could play first, second base. We don't know if Daniel Murphy's going to be back. I just wouldn't be surprised if they get involved in any way, shape, or form, because that Rockies team might look to be competitive. They know they came out of the gates strong last year and just really fizzled out because their offensive production fell. A lot of things fell for them, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's one's an interesting wild card. And this has the feel to me similar to Josh Donaldson. Now, Donaldson had that 1-year deal with the Braves and then cashed in on a 4-year, $92 million. And I think it's going to be a similar contract for LeMahieu at 32 years old. 4 years seems about right. And getting that $23 million, that's not overpaying for him, especially if he continues to hit for the high average. That's just the feel that I have. It seems like a comfortable zone for this. And ultimately, he's a guy that you can slide in on just about every single team. Every single team. So if there's going to be anybody that's willing to pay him, maybe he will take the security there, because he's been playing since 2011. He's a 9-season vet at this point. Don't be surprised if he just takes the mega payday and cashes in. I think it's very, very possible. I mean, don't remember, he spent time in the Cubs organization, the Colorado organization, the Yankees organization. He may want to win, but he's been around long enough that he's trying to get max money that he can, and he just had that little prove-it deal with the Yankees. He had that little prove-it deal. So I'm really looking at them, and I consider him the prize free agent. I know people are going to be excited about Bauer, Ozuna, Realmuto, but you just can't replace steady play and a steady bat. He goes almost under the radar, even how well he performs, and I think he just absolutely is going to make a team very happy this offseason. Whether he signs with a contender, whether he signs with a team trying to get places, make the postseason, he's going to be a good fit, I think, anywhere. He can really do it all. And I'm hopeful that DH continues on in the National League so that we can see a lot of other teams potentially get involved with him. So we'll see there. So that's what I have to say for DJ LeMahieu. He's been impressive. He's been an impressive player. And he's deserving. Hope he gets that contract. Hope he gets a great contract. I think it's going to be the Yankees, but a lot of other teams that could get involved. We got one more guy that I want to talk about. He might be the jewel. He might be the big name, the number one free agent on a lot of people's boards this offseason. Not only because of what he does offensively, but defensively, but actually at a position that's very difficult as well to fill. We're going to take one more quick break, and then we got to talk about where in the world are we going to see JT Realmuto next year in the 2021 season. Coming up here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
The whole story behind JT Realmuto and his offseason is going to be a very interesting watch. Now, we need to point out the things. He's catcher for the Phillies in 2020. As of opening day on 2021, he's going to be 30 years old. What did he do last season? Well, he batted .266, 11 home runs, 32 RBIs, 33 runs. And I'm just really curious about him to see how teams view JT in the long term. And I mean that in a couple reasons. I really do. When you're going to be 30 at the start of a season, it's a line where a lot of teams start to really look at you and go, what's our plan moving forward? He is playing at the catcher position where, let's be honest, longevity there is not necessarily a thing. So is Realmuto going to slide into a first base position a little bit? Is he going to slide into a DH spot a little bit? There's a lot of different things that could happen. It's just very rare for a catcher to be at that spot for long term. And I don't think his bat is going to fall off, and a lot of teams are going to be very interested for him offensively. But at 30 and catcher, that is very great defensively. Teams are going to have him there right away, obviously. But the contract is going to reflect more what teams see going forward. A 10-year deal isn't happening here. I don't think an 8-year deal is happening here. I think something roughly in the 5-year range. And then he will be reevaluated afterwards. Because towards the back end of that deal, he's not going to be a catcher anymore. I don't think that's going to happen. We just move these guys out of that position to try to preserve their careers and make them go longer. So that's something we have to see. And the other thing that's here is this isn't like a normal free agency. I know you could take that and go, duh. Well, we just had a pandemic, a 60-game season. A lot of things are not the same. And that's true. Yeah, of course. But what I mean by that is it doesn't feel like the big names of the past. When we had Machado, when we had Harper, last year when we had Garrett Cole. Yes, Bauer, Realmuto, Mayhew, Ozuna, these guys are all going to help teams next year. But it doesn't feel as big as a free agent class as we're used to. So that's where I don't think the big contracts are necessarily going to come. And that's why I think he's going to get something 5 years, paid very well, close to that $25 million a year range, maybe a little more. It's just, even next year's free agency, it's going to be loaded with shortstops. We know Seeger, we know Lindor, we know Story. We got guys that are going to be big names hitting the free agent market, and that's just at one position. So it's going to be hard to predict necessarily what contract he's going to get. Does he maximize his dollars in shorter years? Does he maximize his years? I don't know where this one's going to go. And even though he is the top free agent, the guy that I think is of the most value, not just short but long term in this class, it's not going to be a contract that we're used to seeing. At least it's not going to be the big payday. So there's quite a few teams that could be interested there. The Phillies, obviously, a reunion is going to make sense. I mean, they gave up the prospects to get him. A lot of chatter about the Phillies wanting to lock him up to an extension. There's no surprise there. They are all invested on him moving forward. The Yankees, do they believe in Gary Sanchez? I wouldn't be. He is ultimately starting to disappoint. Defensively, he doesn't give you that much. Offensively, he's fallen off. He came out so hot for the Yankees. He looked like he was going to be their player there moving forward. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go all in on Real Muto. The Mets, we obviously talked about. Now, this isn't just hey, they're going to be aggressive in free agent pitch, but also it makes sense position-wise. They declined their $10 million option for Wilson Ramos, so they're going to need a new catcher. And while they have a prospect there that could slide into that, he's only going to be 19 in November. Only 42 games at A-ball. So he's not close to making the majors. So Real Muto is a big, big name that I think the Mets would be in on. An interesting name I've heard talk about is the Cardinals, and that's Yadier Molina's 38. Okay? And while he is a fan favorite in St. Louis, well, he can't play forever. I'm sorry, he can't play forever. And Real Muto would be a great grab, and especially when you know already the issue with their offense, it would help them out. The Angels are going to be a name that people are interested in. They just spent on Rendon. Pitching is a problem. Trevor Bauer obviously makes a lot more sense for the Angels, but they're going to continue to add any type of impact player, and there might be the belief for the Angels that adding a catcher is only going to help our pitching staff. I see it. I get it. That rumor's being floated around. The Angels are tied in to a lot of players, and I don't necessarily understand why. Like, we know their weakness. Go get pitching. If you're tied into pitching prospects, I get it, but we don't need to be in on everybody. But also another team that's interesting is the Nationals. I'll talk about them in a little bit. So the teams that are going to offer, that I think are going to offer the big deals, it's going to be the Phillies, and it's going to be the Mets. Like we talked about, the Phillies are invested. He's been a two-time All-Star. They are going to try to keep him. Philadelphia needs to figure out how to get to the postseason right now. They have spent so much money on players. They have invested so much. They have young talent. They have free agent talent. They have pitchers that are capable of great things. It's all there. They can't afford to take the step back and lose their top catcher. Okay? That's not going to be a good look for the front office to let Real Muto slip away. And if he does leave, there is going to be probably a lot of chatter about how the Phillies management was not able to get a deal done. Because when they made that trade for Real Muto, there was a belief system there as we're going to try to get this extension done so that he's here long term. Well, it hasn't happened. So this is the clock is ticking for you guys to get this done. I think the Phillies are a team that are going to offer big money. And the other team, like I said before, the Mets, they need. Not only are they going into this with an aggressive approach into free agency, this is a position of such massive need. They don't have any prospect coming up or any guy on the roster they feel great about. They kind of showed their hand when they declined Wilson Ramos' option that I think they're going to be all in. They're going to be making the move for Real Muto. If there was one free agent that I felt more confident in the rest that is going to be potentially a Met, it's this one. I think they're going to give him the contract offer that he wants. Now, the teams that should offer, I'm going to stay with that Cardinals. Now, Yadier Molina said that he wants to play a couple more seasons. And that's fine and dandy. I have no issue with you declaring that. But a 38-year-old catcher is not something that a lot of franchises are going to get excited about. Now, Molina continues to be smart behind the plate, works well with pitching staffs, continues to be very useful defensively. I will never take that away from him, ever. But you need offensive production. And while the 262 average that he gave you this year wasn't necessarily a problem, the decline in his career is kind of evident offensively. So are you going to be the franchise that holds on too long to a player just because your fans love him, or moves on when you see a great opportunity? I mean, the Cardinals, they've had one of the league's best catchers for a decade. I mean, they really have. But the idea of replacing Molina with Realmuto, who some consider to be the best catcher in the game right now, I like the sound of that, personally. If I was a Cardinals fan, continue to have that position locked up and steady when we know it's hard to get someone at that position to be a contributor on both sides, behind the plate and batting. Whew, I think they really should be considering it. And the other team that I think should be considering is the Nationals. And now this one's funny to me because now Kurt Suzuki is leading the free agency, so they're in need of a catcher. So we'll start with that. Realmuto has been playing in the National League East his entire career. Marlins, Phillies. Very familiar. Very well known. But also, the Nationals kind of got a young star that they want to keep happy. And Juan Soto has made it pretty clear and pretty public that he wants Realmuto to be on the team. Discussing how the two love to chat, talk trash every time Soto steps up to the plate. There's a real connection there. And that would be quite a bit of help to a team that's looking to rebound. We've talked in the past about how the National League East isn't necessarily guaranteed to everybody next year. Obviously, the Braves will probably be the betting favorites, but do you believe in the Marlins again? The Phillies have been so up and down. The Mets, we don't know what they're going to be necessarily. The Nationals come back healthy. Combination of Trey Turner, Juan Soto, Realmuto, along with hopefully a healthy Strasburg and Scherzer. You got something building there. You got something building there, and you could be going back to a postseason appearance. So it's something that I would definitely be considering. So I really do think the Cards and Nationals should be offering. But when it comes down to it, the best fits, the best possible fits, I think it's those Mets. I think that's the best one. Yankees, I could understand the argument. You're just making your team even better. If you have concerns with your pitching staff as well, he's going to help with that. And then I want to say the Phillies. They're kind of just barely on the outside of the Yankees and Mets as the best fit. They all make sense to me. And they're all going to be great fits. So I could see this one. I don't think this one is as widespread as Mayhew. I don't think there's nearly going to be as many teams in on this. While many teams should be considering it, because just getting a quality catcher, it means so much to your team. It's hard. It's hard. Very difficult. And this guy's the best one on the market. Those don't just happen in free agency. They don't just happen. So we'll see. I'm thinking he's going to be a New York Met. That's just my gut feeling at this point for JT Realmuto. But we'll see what happens once we get closer and closer to those winter meetings in free agency. So that's going to be it here for this episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. A lot of speculation today. Where do we think it's going to go? What fits make sense? There's a lot of players to just talk about. We got to get to a lot of other guys. I mean, we've covered 5 names, big names, in the last 2 podcasts I've recorded. There's a lot of other discount players out there that are going to be interesting as well. But that's a topic for another day. We'll get to that. I want to thank you once again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. It means a great deal that you download, listen, take the time. If you could do one more thing, I would be so grateful if you're able to leave a positive comment, review, something you loved about the show, something you want us to talk about more. Maybe you have some ideas on Lindor, Mayhew, Realmuto. Maybe there's another free agent on your mind or another trade target on your mind that you would like us to talk about. I know I have a couple more that I want to discuss in the future. We'll keep that little tease there. But I want to thank you one last time for listening here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.